What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got another live fantasy football mock draft for you back on ESPN with a 10-team PPR mock where we will be selecting from that third overall position. And while this thing loads, if you guys enjoy, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. Let us hear it in the comments section as well, along with any other questions you guys might have. Give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And if you guys enjoy the content and want to get more rankings, more in-detail help for your fantasy football drafts, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide, now available for purchase online at alldaypigskin.com. Everything you could possibly want in terms of rankings, information, player bios, guys to target, guys to avoid, details in the description. And with that being said, let's now get into this thing because the first pick has been made. And as you would expect, it is Christian McCaffrey. And for the most part in this draft, like I said, only 10 teams. Most of everybody is in here, so I'm hoping we get a good, indication of what this thing might look like in terms of accuracy. And now we are on the clock with the third pick overall. McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, I think is going to be 99.9% of the time the first two picks in PPR especially. So here we've got a decision to make. Barkley is the next recommended player, but I'll go with Alvin Kamara here. Again, there's a lot of guys that I like later on that you can make a case should be drafted a little bit earlier, but Kamara is that PPR type of running back. Obviously, the quarterback situation has to get sorted out in New Orleans. So, picking him this early, a lot of it is speculation and kind of hoping for the best case scenario. If Taysom Hill ends up being the quarterback for the Saints, then I would, knock Alvin Kamara down in my rankings. That's me personally. But, in PPR, again, he's probably going to be around the fifth choice, sixth choice in terms of the draft in the first round. But right now, nothing has been necessarily decided yet with the Saints, whether it's going to be Taysom Hill, whether it's going to be Jameis Winston. So we're just drafting Alvin Kamara at the third spot. Other guys that we would have considered, probably him and Derrick Henry. I know Henry is more of a standard scoring running back, but he's got the highest rushing upside out of any running back in the league. Other running backs to mention, Saquon Barkley. Yes, a lot of people are high on him, but he is coming back from a major injury, and there are some rumors that, he might be limited to kick off the season, that he might not be ready to kick off the season in week one necessarily, less than 100%. So I'm just kind of backing away from that due to that reason. Other running backs, you see Ezekiel Elliott. I think there's some question marks there as well. Jonathan Taylor, not as much of a pass-catching running back. Austin Eckler, love him. Aaron Jones, again, probably going to be a borderline top 5 running back. Nick Chubb, more so suited in standard scoring formats, similar to a Derrick Henry. Cam Akers, Joe Mixon, I think there's a chance in 10-team leagues that one of those guys could fall to us in the second round. So that's kind of what I'm banking on there. And I should mention here something interesting that happened. With the 6th pick overall, the first pass catcher off the board, not a wide receiver, but instead it is Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. You're going to see Kelce be a first-round selection, definitely, pretty much regardless of the size of your drafts. But I am a little bit surprised to see him being the first pass catcher taken off the board. Obviously, you've still got Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill there, Stephon Diggs, even a Calvin Ridley, who, if he's there for me here, it'll be tough to pass up in the second round, all things considered now that Julio Jones is gone. To me, the point being is that at tight end, as great as Kelce is, and yes, he is sensational, you can get someone like a Darren Waller later on, probably 2 rounds later, 2.5 rounds later. So that's just something that I like to bring up. But for now, we are on the clock, and unfortunately, we get sniped with Calvin Ridley. Other guys that we had mentioned, Cam Akers, Nick Chubb, and Joe Mixon all go in the second round, middle of the second round, probably the way it should be. And right now, I'm quickly going to sort through the running backs because I'm looking at the options here. Najee Harris, I'd rather not bank so much on the rookie running back. I think we can go and get someone in the third round. So here, I'm kind of just going to look at wide receivers. The one that I like the most out of those remaining probably is actually DeAndre Hopkins in PPR scoring. I like his upside in terms of receptions, and he is in a high-scoring offense with the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray improving. Other guys that I did consider, Justin Jefferson, Michael Thomas, and probably A.J. Brown as well. Michael Thomas, I would have loved to take there, but it would have been going real heavy on the New Orleans Saints. And again, not necessarily something I'm opposed against, but just trying to, point out that fact that getting those stacks can be sometimes a great thing, especially, let's say, if it's the Chiefs offense and you've got a bona fide quarterback. But if it's, again, on a New Orleans offense where there's already some question marks at the quarterback position, I'm a little bit less likely to make that selection. Here, if he's available, again, Justin Jefferson is an option. I do want to go running back here, though, at some point, because I know if I wait, the guys that I'm considering in terms of options at the running back position, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Chris Carson, are probably very unlikely to get back to me. So here, as much as I love Justin Jefferson, as much as I love Michael Thomas, I believe I have to address the more important position at running back. I'm looking at it. To me, that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And again, it hurts that I'm going to be passing up on Justin Jefferson and Michael Thomas. That's why we did go with another wide receiver initially. So here we're just going to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Again, I think you could argue Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson probably have higher ceilings, maybe higher floors as well. But you got to address the running back position, folks. If you're going, into the majority of your drafts and I guess avoiding any type of specified strategy, whether it's zero running backs, zero wide receiver, or whatever the case might be, and you're just letting the draft fall to you, it's going to be tough if you don't come out with after the first 3 rounds with at least 2 running backs, especially if you're kind of drafting towards one of the extremes, one of the first 3 picks, one of the last 3 picks, because then you have such a long cycle in between your next selections. So for that reason, I kind of had to go running back. But I will say getting Michael Thomas in the 3rd round, getting Justin Jefferson in the 3rd round, those are going to probably be the best values in this entire draft. But again, the point here is building the best roster from top to bottom, the most balanced roster. And I know that for a fact, when we get to the 4th round, these running back choices are going to be a little bit scarce. And honestly, right now, a lot of this goes into the fact that this is a 10-team league, so a lot of the teams here are going to be extremely talented. I mean, again, you see Antonio Gibson falling to almost the end of the 3rd round. That's incredible value. Now, the way this thing is shaping up, we might get Chris Carson to fall to us. If we do, you could question our selection of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but then on the other hand, Chris Carson just becomes a steal at that value. So there's a little bit give and take, so I'm not too worried about that. I should mention here something interesting that did happen is that Darren Waller was the 2nd tight end off the board. And I continue to say this, that should be the consensus once we get closer and closer to August and September. Darren Waller over George Kittle. To me, George Kittle just has way too many question marks on that run-first offense with quarterback inconsistency, some injury history, other emerging pass catchers. So Darren Waller is the guy for me as the 2nd best tight end. Then you see J.K. Dobbins, Terry McLaurin, Josh Jacobs, Keenan Allen lasting all the way until the start of the 4th round in PPR scoring is an absolute steal. You could also say the same with Allen Robinson, even though there is some quarterback instability there in Chicago. Not really instability, but more so question marks in terms of when the hell will Justin Fields actually play for the Chicago Bears. Coaches saying, we're going to stick with Andy Dalton, stay patient. Well, that's not exactly what fantasy managers want to hear, but probably long-term, it's the best-case scenario. We'll see if really Justin Fields plays as well as people expect maybe in the preseason and really doesn't give the Bears any other choice than to start him, then that's probably the best case scenario for all the starters on that offense. David Montgomery just goes, speaking of the Chicago Bears. And now looking at the players available to us, damn it all to hell. Chris Carson just gets sniped from us. I was almost just being quiet and trying not to mention his name. Not like, that really means anything, but yeah, that would have been our selection, no questions about it. But again, this goes back to the fact why we selected Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the third round. We were preparing for a scenario like this, where Chris Carson wasn't available, where our top choices were off the board. So now there is a fall off at that running back position. Instead, I'm going to focus on wide receiver, and the two guys that I like the most here are one, Julio Jones, and then Robert Woods. I have zero problem with Julio Jones in Tennessee. I think all things considered, I've said this a million times already, considering that we broke down the Julio Jones trade. But with all the teams he could have gone to, this is not a bad landing spot for Julio Jones. Yes, his ceiling is lowered a little bit because the Titans are a run-first team. But, to me, A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, similar type of situation, whether Julio Jones plays opposite one or the other. Yes, the passing attempts will be a little bit lower for the Tennessee Titans offensively. But again, Julio Jones is so talented. He's still going to get you between, I believe, 1,100 to 1,200 receiving yards. And when healthy, the guy is an absolute stud. So I really like the value there at the end of the fourth round. I think he should be ranked higher. Robert Woods just goes off the board as well. Like I said before, he was our second choice. I'm curious to see if I had taken Robert Woods, whether Julio Jones would have been available. Maybe some people kind of being off on him after the trade, but we'll never know, I guess. George Kittle also lasting until the end of the fourth round. That is great value for him. And we just saw Patrick Mahomes get taken, and I believe that he is the first quarterback off the board. And I will say, this is probably the most accurate representation of when a quarterback should actually be selected. Again, this is 10 teams, so maybe even though it's the fifth round, think about it, late fourth round if it's in a larger league. But taking quarterback early on when you have so many other loaded positions, it just doesn't make sense. So here, maybe I've tipped my hand. I'm not going quarterback. A guy that I'm going to go instead and target is someone that I think it's undervalued. Cooper Kupp at the wide receiver position. So loading up on wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Cooper Kupp. I've said it with Cooper Kupp before as well. He's pretty much identical to Robert Woods on that offense. Matthew Stafford elevates the ceiling for both of those guys. And, other than touchdowns last season, Kupp and Robert Woods pretty much put up, for the most part, identical types of stats. And with touchdowns being so variable, I think Cooper Kupp can be great this year. Again, right behind Robert Woods in terms of the majority of the categories. I like him in PPR scoring. I think he's got a high floor and a higher ceiling now with Matthew Stafford in town. So I personally love the selection of Cooper Kupp. I think we have three very strong wide receivers, and I was able to, focus on going wide receiver heavy in the last couple of rounds after landing a quote-unquote, stud in Alvin Kamara that kind of allows that versatility. And think about it kind of having Christian McCaffrey. If you land Christian McCaffrey, he's so talented at the running back position that you can go a little bit more wide receiver heavy early on and then kind of have a running back afterwards that isn't quite in the tier of, the next guy's, tier 2, tier 3. But since you have Christian McCaffrey, he does a great job of balancing it out. Same type of logic with Alvin Kamara, even though I would argue Clyde Edwards-Helaire is someone with great potential as well, so I'm not too worried about that. Right now, we're probably going to see some auto picks here, so it's going to become a little bit chalky in terms of guys taking the next best players available. I should mention here we have seen, after our selection of Cooper Kupp, another tight end off the board, Mark Andrews. Again, I've said this before, TJ Hawkinson, he should be the fourth, maybe even third tight end off the board in PPR scoring. Yes, I would have no problem if at the end of the day you take him over George Kittle. That's how much I love TJ Hawkinson. I'm telling you guys, he is the next Darren Waller 2.0 for this season. And now we're kind of having things speed up. Josh Allen, the latest selection, the second quarterback off the board, all the way in the 6th round. Again, this is probably the perfect way I would kind of draw things up. If I was selecting every single one of these picks for these teams, I would be waiting on quarterback until much later on. Kyler Murray now becomes a great value in the 6th round. And honestly, pretty much all the quarterbacks right now, this is where they have some of the best value. And right now, I'd have no problem selecting them. You know, a Lamar Jackson, a Kyler Murray, guys in the 6th round that are great values, regardless if it's 10-team or 12-team league. Right now, Tyler Lockett is someone that's still on the board. Obviously, he wouldn't be on our starting roster because he'd be on the bench, but great value still at this point in time. Dak Prescott, now the 4th quarterback off the board. And when I was talking quarterback rankings for the 2021 season, I actually brought this up. Dak Prescott ahead of a Lamar Jackson, who I think has a much higher ceiling, is interesting. So you guys should be capitalizing on the fact that Lamar Jackson is falling and get him while you can. You know, so TJ Hawkinson, what I'm doing right now is looking at the tight end rankings, looking at the quarterback rankings, and if both these guys are available to just decide, so they're pretty much neck and neck, to decide who I should take first, whether it should be TJ Hawkinson or Lamar Jackson. And since they're so close to each other, you know, I'm probably leaning the tight end position, the one that is harder to replace in terms of having a stacked pool of quarterbacks that I'd be even all right if I don't land Lamar Jackson. So Kareem Hunt goes there. You know, he would have been a nice piece in terms of depth at the running back position. But Mike Davis is still there, too, is something that I should mention. However, right now, I'm just going to go get my guy. I'm going to get TJ Hawkinson. I want my starting tight end. I want a top 5 tight end, top 4 tight end. So I'm not even sweating this. I love that selection. The fact that we were able to get TJ Hawkinson at the end of the 6th round, great value in my opinion. I do think once we get closer to August and September, people are going to be jumping on the bandwagon, and Hawkinson could see his ADP rise by almost a full round. Kyle Pitts is also someone that I considered, but again, I think Hawkinson is the more well-rounded and safer choice. And look, hey, you see it pays off. Kyle Pitts is the next selection. So if we had waited on tight end and instead maybe got on Mike Davis or Lamar Jackson, would have backfired. And, you know, I've made that mistake before, so I just wanted to kind of rectify it here and, you know, practice the philosophy of getting your guy, especially when it's great value at this point in time. I do think TJ Hawkinson's ranking should be higher than it is here on ESPN. And now you're seeing a run on a little bit of a tight end. Kyle Pitts, Logan Thomas, Mike Davis goes off the board. And here I mentioned before, depending on what this pick right before me does, I will be taking Lamar Jackson here. Whether that's in the cards or not, I don't quite know yet. If it isn't and we get sniped, I'm looking at other options very quickly. There's nobody that I love at running back right now. At wide receiver, you know, I'm looking at it again. Nobody that I'm necessarily in love with. I probably would have gone with someone like Brendan Ayuk or a T. Higgins. Those would have probably been my top choices. I know Courtland Sutton is great and all, but I'm just scared by the no quarterback prospect in Denver. So here, I'm going to go with the guy that I've been preaching about, Lamar Jackson. I think he's sensational value. I think he is right now one of the best values at the quarterback position from top to bottom. I get him in the 7th round as, I believe, the 5th quarterback. Yes, the 5th quarterback after Dak Prescott. I'm telling you guys, if this was my actual team come September and week 1, I would be very, very happy with it. The only thing that could have made it better is if Chris Carson had fallen to us and, you know, in the what would have been, I believe, 4th round. So there we would have probably gotten him instead of a Julio Jones or a Cooper Kupp. But I do think it's probably a little bit better. So what we essentially did is get more wide receiver depth instead of more running back depth. Running back, obviously, a little more important position. So that's the only thing that would have, you know, I think increased our draft grade here, but at the end of the day, it's out of our hands. We can't control that. So with what we had available to us, I'm very happy with the roster that we put together. Definitely 100%. You could argue whether DeAndre Hopkins in the second round, whether we should have picked him or Justin Jefferson or a Michael Thomas. Yes, that's a conversation that you can have, but I think all those guys are great options. To some extent, it comes down to personal preference. So keep that in mind. Now, well, we pretty much got our starting roster filled out. We're not going to spend time or really waste time taking defenses or kickers. There's no point in that exercise. We're just going to fortify our bench now, and this is really going to speed up because, like I said, we're going to see a lot of auto picks. And the guys that I'm looking at right now, T. Higgins is still on the board, someone that I don't mind at this point in time. Like I said before, I would have considered him in the prior round as well. If you believe the hype coming out from Cincinnati, T. Higgins is someone to watch out for. I have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins pretty much ranked one right next to the other. So I have no problem with either one of them. I see, for Higgins, probably worst case scenario, low to mid-level wide receiver 2. Now, again, yes, we need running back depth, but how great are the options at this point in time compared to if T. Higgins is still available? James Robinson and Melvin Gordon are kind of the guys that stick out. Javonte Williams for the Broncos, also someone that potentially you could take, but I just think that he's going to be someone that makes an impact later on in the season. So I'm just a little bit nervous with that. James Robinson, I guess, would be the guy that I have ranked the highest after this point. Raheem Mostert, yes, he's great when he's healthy and he's the guy, but there's so many guys in San Francisco and he gets injured so often that I don't have the faith necessary in James Robinson. I think he's just a little bit too risky. Other guys at the running back position, I'm just kind of trying to look to see if there's anybody that I love that might have fallen. J.D. McKissick is a pass-catching running back. Again, this is PPR scoring, so it does bring value there. Other guys, James Conner, Kenyon Drake, Ronald Jones isn't a bad selection either. But if it's down to one of these guys and T. Higgins, again, I'm going T. Higgins. The last couple of selections here that have taken place, I do want to highlight them to see if there's any sensational picks. Travis Etienne, I don't like that considering James Robinson was still available. Courtland Sutton, good value there, depending on the situation with, the quarterback. Then Tyler Boyd just got selected. Let's quickly run through the guys here that were selected because we already know who we're drafting. So Aaron Rodgers, Brendan Ayuk, Robbie Anderson, Juju Smith, DJ Shark, Brendan Cooks. Cooks is a very polarizing guy, not because of him personally, but because of his quarterback and whether we're still guessing whether Deshaun Watson is going to play or not. Justin Herbert in the 8th round, I like that value. Chase Edmonds, Devonta Smith, Leonard Fournette, and then Dallas Goedert. So here we're going T. Higgins. I mentioned it. I just wanted to quickly run through the last couple of selections. Antonio Brown still on the board. You better believe I'm going to be targeting him next. To me, has the highest ceiling bar none out of these remaining wide receivers. And again, I'm going to quickly go to the list of overall players to see if we're, maybe missing somebody. I guess James Robinson, you can make the case that we should be selecting him if we want to be principled here and get running back depth. I guess I'll do that instead. It's probably a little bit smarter than going Antonio Brown since we have so much depth at the position. So yeah, I'll kind of pivot and go into James Robinson as our next selection, unless obviously he is sniped from us. We'll see. If he is, then I will go Antonio Brown because I don't trust the Denver backfield. So it's simple as that. But if not, I'm going James Robinson here. And yes, we are afforded that opportunity since Curtis Samuel was the last selection. So we're going James Robinson. We get our backup running back. And again, man, more than anything, I'm just kind of bummed out for James Robinson because he had a sensational season his rookie year being undrafted. The Jaguars had him on a deal that was worth pennies, and then you still draft Travis Etienne in the 1st round. Makes absolutely zero sense to me. Like, the only thing that you could say is, okay, him and Trevor Lawrence were teammates in Clemson, but, that's not reason enough to draft a player in my opinion, but it is what it is. We'll see what happens with James Robinson. That's a really intriguing competition that I think is going to be just one to watch as we get closer to the season and honestly in season as well. So here we'll make a couple more selections because ultimately we're just looking at just very deep bench plays and it's on auto pick. So you're going to see defenses, you're going to see kickers, and the exercise kind of loses its point then. So let's queue up some players. Let's see if Antonio Brown will make it to us. Let's queue up some other individuals. I'm looking at the running back position to see if somebody somehow does fall to us. Ronald Jones, I don't mind. I think he's also a very good depth piece as well, considering that he still is the primary running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Melvin Gordon just goes. If I had to bet, I think Antonio Brown might get selected here via auto pick because I'm looking, again, there's 4 picks before us, auto pick. So, yeah, there's a good chance that happens. But all in all, I'm really happy with the way this team turned out. I'm not too worried about selecting a backup quarterback, considering we have Lamar Jackson. I'm not too worried about selecting a backup tight end, since we have TJ Hockenson. That is one of the bonuses of getting one of those high-end guys at those positions. So now we can just focus on getting best player available. And like I said before, I think that's Antonio Brown. I think that's Ronald Jones. Marvin Jones just goes, a guy that I really liked and someone I would have probably looked at if Antonio Brown wasn't there. So right now, yeah, what I'll do is I'll just select probably Antonio Brown right now and then go with Ronald Jones just because I'm looking at, their rank and Antonio Brown is higher. So in case we get into any more auto pick situations that we can go with the higher ranked player and then have a higher chance of getting Ronald Jones afterwards. Simple enough. But this will probably be our last pick here, and then we can kind of dive into it, give an overall grade to this team, and talk about other players that we would have potentially selected. Jalen Hurts at this point in time is a great value piece. I think he's got top 10 quarterback potential, especially due to what he can do with his legs. I'm thinking like a less polished Lamar Jackson. So, like I said, at this point, he could be a flyer that you just take a chance on and potentially hit a home run on. Now, scrolling through the list here, other guys to just to see if there's anybody we're missing. You could argue that we should be getting our handcuff in Latavius Murray, who I will queue up here. So again, just practicing sound draft principles. Definitely with one of these guys that have bona fide handcuffs, you should be getting their backups when you can. And Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray definitely fall in that category. And honestly, I might take Latavius Murray ahead of Ronald Jones because if Alvin Kamara goes down, Latavius Murray is an RB1. But you can't really make that case with Ronald Jones, even if like Leonard Fournette goes down or something like that, just because they have brought in Giovanni Bernard. So that's the situation there. So yeah, I'll take Latavius Murray here. We have our handcuff. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, we've got Ronald Jones queued up, but for all intents and purposes, we can grade this draft. I really like Russell Gage, one last player to kind of mention. But overall, just looking at this team, Lamar Jackson, I think we A+ in terms of when we got him and in terms of his upside. Alvin Kamara, you could have made a case for a lot of players with the 3rd overall pick. That's kind of where the discussion begins after McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. So I have no problem leaving that open to discussion. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, again, probably you could call it a reach, but considering we had to wait so long until our next selection for a running back to fall to us, I kind of just went with the highest upside guy. DeAndre Hopkins, again, personal preference. Julio Jones, I like the value there. Love the TJ Hockenson value. I think that's another A+ pick, similar to Lamar Jackson. Cooper Kupp, I like the value there. And then our bench, again, great value pieces in my opinion. T. Higgins, probably the best one. Then Robinson, Antonio Brown, another great one. And getting a handcuff in Murray. So overall, I'm probably going to give this grade, give this team a grade of a B+, maybe even an A- on paper. I think one of our better mock drafts that we have done. But again, just pointing out, it is a 10-team mock, so more oftentimes than not, these teams will all have very strong rosters. So either way, though, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree? What were your thoughts here? And again, if you guys are interested, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Just go to alldaypigskin.com. All the details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.